The alarm sounds. A human warship. The control room of the Imperial Armada's flagship was filled with the usual hum of machinery and quiet chatter of officers monitoring the vast emptiness of space. It was supposed to be a routine day, until the alarm sounded. A loud, blaring siren echoed through the halls. Red warning lights flashed. Every officer snapped to attention. Admiral Zorvax, a tall, scaled alien with deep violet skin, narrowed his eyes at the glowing holographic display in front of him. "Report," his voice boomed. A nervous officer tapped away at his console, sweat forming on his brow. "Admiral, it's a human warship, sir." Silence fell over the control room. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then, a second officer, a pale-skinned alien with large black eyes, rechecked the readings. His voice wavered. "Confirmed, Admiral. A human warship is approaching our sector, and it's massive." Admiral Zorvax clenched his jaw. Humans. This had to be a mistake. The Galactic Empire had dominated the galaxy for over 1,000 years. They had conquered countless planets, crushed entire civilizations. The humans were just another species. Primitive, weak, nothing special. Yet, the readings did not lie. Zorvax studied the holographic display. The warship was unlike anything they had seen before. It was a hulking mass of steel and power, moving silently through the darkness. Its size rivaled the Empire's dreadnoughts, but its energy readings were off the charts. "It's not responding to hails, Admiral." Zorvax's fingers tightened around the edge of the command console. Why would a single human warship enter Empire space alone? Was this a mistake? A provocation, or something far worse? He turned to his communications officer. "Send an immediate message. Warn them to stop. If they do not, we will open fire." The officer nodded and sent the transmission. "Unidentified human vessel, you are entering restricted Imperial space. Halt immediately, or you will be destroyed." The message was sent. They waited. Seconds passed, then minutes. No response. Instead, the warship kept moving forward. Zorvax's claws tapped against the metal surface of his command chair. This was wrong. Very wrong. No species ever ignored an Empire warning, not unless they had a death wish. The holographic display zoomed in on the approaching vessel. It was still too far to see clearly, but its silhouette was menacing. A sleek but heavily armored body, powerful thrusters, and an eerie, almost predatory movement through space. The officers whispered among themselves. Are the humans planning to attack? Maybe their ship is damaged, or maybe they don't know they're in our space. "No," Zorvax said coldly. "They know." Another officer gasped as new data flashed on the screen. "Sir, this warship's energy output is impossible." Zorvax frowned. "What do you mean?" The officer gulped. "Our scanners show its shields are stronger than anything we've ever encountered. And its weapons, if these readings are correct, this one warship has more firepower than an entire Empire fleet." A chill ran through the control room. Zorvax refused to believe it. This was a bluff. It had to be. He gritted his teeth. "Prepare our warships. Form defensive lines. If they do not stop in the next 2 minutes, we will destroy them." The Empire's warships began to mobilize. Hundreds of ships, from cruisers to battleships, formed a deadly blockade. Their weapons locked onto the human vessel. The tension was suffocating. The countdown began. 2 minutes. The human ship did not stop. 1 minute. It continued forward, as if it had no fear. 30 seconds. The officers stared at the screen, their hands trembling over the weapon controls. 15 seconds. Zorvax's heart pounded. Something was wrong. Something was very, very wrong. 10 seconds. His mind screamed at him to stop, to think. But it was too late. 5 seconds. "Fire," Zorvax commanded. A barrage of energy beams and missiles shot toward the human warship. And then, something happened that no one expected. The warship did not dodge. it did not attempt to evade. Instead, it activated its shields and absorbed every single attack. The explosions lit up the void of space, blinding everyone for a brief second. But when the light faded, the human warship was still there, completely unharmed. A deep, chilling silence filled the control room. And then, a transmission came through. A calm, human voice spoke. "This is Captain Darius Kane of the UNS Phantom. You had your chance. Now, it's our turn." And with that, the human warship surged forward. Zorvax's blood ran cold. The battle had begun. The Empire's last mistake, underestimating humans. The control room was dead silent. Admiral Zorvax could feel the weight of every officer's gaze on him, their expressions filled with shock, confusion, and most dangerously, fear. Their full barrage had done nothing. The human warship stood untouched, its massive, dark hull reflecting the dim starlight like the blade of an executioner's axe. This is impossible. Zorvax had led the Imperial Armada for over 3 decades. He had crushed rebellions, destroyed entire fleets, and shattered empires in their infancy. Never had he seen a warship withstand a full fleet's attack without even flinching. And yet, here it was. The UNS Phantom surged forward, its thrusters burning a deep blue against the blackness of space. It was not retreating. It was not stopping. It was hunting. The transmission came again. That same calm, steady human voice. "I gave you a warning." Zorvax gritted his teeth, his claws digging into the armrest of his command throne. "Analysis," he barked. "How did it survive our assault?" A trembling officer scrambled to answer, his pale blue fingers shaking over the console. "Yes, sir. Their shields. They're not like ours. The energy signatures are unstable, fluctuating in ways our sensors can't track." Zorvax narrowed his eyes. "Speak clearly, Lieutenant." The officer gulped. "Their shields aren't just deflecting our attacks. They're absorbing them. Every shot we fire only makes them stronger." A heavy silence followed. Zorvax's mind raced. Shields that absorbed energy. That was impossible. No species had ever developed such technology. Even the Empire's most advanced research divisions had only dreamed of such a breakthrough. And yet, the humans had done it. Zorvax turned toward his weapons officer. "Fire again. All ships. All weapons. Do not stop until that warship is gone." The officer hesitated. But sir, if they're shields." "Do it," Zorvax roared. The fleet obeyed. Hundreds of energy cannons, plasma torpedoes, and railguns unleashed another devastating storm of firepower toward the UNS Phantom. But this time, something even worse happened. The human warship's shields glowed bright white. A surge of energy rippled across its surface. And then, it redirected the entire attack back at the Empire's fleet. Massive explosions erupted as the Empire's own firepower tore through their own ranks. Dozens of cruisers and battleships were instantly vaporized. The Imperial Armada had fired upon itself. Panic. The command room descended into chaos. Officers shouted over each other, alarms blared, and sparks rained from overloaded consoles. The Empire's once mighty fleet was breaking apart, burning wreckage drifting in all directions. Zorvax's heart pounded in his chest. He turned back to the display, his vision blurred with disbelief. "Hail them," he commanded. "Get me the human captain. Now." The transmission opened. On the holographic screen, a human finally appeared. Captain Darius Kane stood on the bridge of the UNS Phantom, arms crossed over his chest. His expression was calm, cold, certain. Behind him, his officers moved with quiet precision, completely in control of the battlefield. "Surrender," Kane said simply. Zorvax's claws dug deeper into the armrest. His pride screamed at him to never bow to a lesser species. He straightened his posture, forcing himself to sound composed. "You are outnumbered, human. We are the Galactic Empire. You are just one warship. One ship cannot win a war. Kane tilted his head slightly. A small, knowing smirk formed on his lips. One ship is all we need. And then, the UNS Phantom disappeared. Zorvax froze. The warship had been right in front of them, clear as day. But in a blink, it was gone. His officers frantically checked their scanners. Where did it go? It vanished. Sir, no warp signature detected. That's impossible. And then, a massive explosion rocked the flagship. The bridge shook violently. Consoles sparked. Lights flickered. Officers were thrown to the floor. Smoke filled the air. Zorvax coughed, struggling to remain standing. Damage report. Another officer screamed in horror. Sir, they just took out 3 of our battleships simultaneously. Zorvax's blood ran cold. The UNS Phantom reappeared behind them, as if it had been there the whole time. Zorvax's mind reeled. How? How had they moved so fast? How had they bypassed all their sensors? The human captain's voice returned. I warned you. You didn't listen. The UNS Phantom fired a single shot. A beam of golden-white energy lanced across space, piercing through another Empire dreadnought like a knife through soft flesh. The explosion that followed was blinding. Zorvax stumbled back, his claws trembling. His officers turned to him, awaiting an order. Any order. But for the first time in his life, Admiral Zorvax had none. He had lost. And the humans had only just begun. First contact, or first strike. A thick, suffocating silence filled the Imperial flagship's command room. Smoke curled from overloaded consoles, sparks flickered in the dim lighting, and the stench of burning metal mixed with the acrid smell of fear. Admiral Zorvax stood rigid, his claws twitching at his sides. His officers, once so sure of their dominance, sat frozen in shock. The Galactic Empire had ruled for over 1,000 years, its fleet unmatched, its enemies crushed without mercy. And yet, here they were, defeated by one ship. The UNS Phantom hovered in the vastness of space like a shadow of death, its black hull reflecting the fiery wreckage of Empire warships. Zorvax forced himself to breathe. Think. There was still a way out. There had to be. He straightened his back, ignoring the thin sheen of sweat forming on his skin. Hail them again, he ordered, voice cold and commanding. His communications officer hesitated. Sir, should we not? Do it. The officer swallowed and obeyed, reopening the comm channel. A moment later, the human returned. Captain Darius Kane stood on his warship's bridge, his expression unreadable. The holographic screen projected his image across the room, his sharp, calculating eyes scanning the Empire's broken fleet. For the first time in his career, Zorvax felt like prey. Kane didn't speak immediately. He let the silence drag out, long enough for Zorvax to feel the weight of his failure. And then, do you understand now? Kane's voice was calm, but beneath that calm was an edge, a warning. Zorvax refused to show weakness. You've made a mistake, human, he said, stepping forward. Destroying our ships, threatening an admiral of the Empire. You have no idea what you've just started. Kane tilted his head slightly, as if considering. Then he let out a small, humorless chuckle. That's where you're wrong. We know exactly what we started. The question is, do you? Zorvax clenched his jaw. The Empire is endless. You might have won this battle, but... Kane cut him off. This wasn't a battle. His voice was ice. This was a demonstration. Zorvax's blood turned to stone. A demonstration. Not an attack. Not an ambush. The humans had done this on purpose. They had let the Empire see their strength. They had allowed them to fire first. They had shown the entire fleet that nothing, not numbers, not superior firepower, not a millennium of war, could stop them. And then Kane said something that made the room go deathly still. If we wanted you dead, Admiral, we wouldn't be having this conversation. A shiver ran through the command room. The humans could have annihilated them, but they didn't. Why? Zorvax forced his voice to stay steady. Then why are we still alive? Kane's expression darkened. Because we don't like war, Admiral. But we're really, really good at it. Zorvax's claws curled into fists. He wanted to lash out, to reject the humans' arrogance. But he couldn't, because deep down he knew. Kane was right. The Empire's fleets had fought many wars, but none like this. None against humans. And now that they'd realized too late. They had no chance of winning. Zorvax forced a smirk. You expect me to believe that your species doesn't enjoy war? That you attack our fleet and spare us out of kindness? Kane's expression didn't change. I don't expect you to believe anything, he said simply, but you will listen. Kane took a slow breath, then spoke the next words with deadly certainty. This was your only warning. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Kane leaned forward slightly. If the Empire ever threatens human space again, if you ever send another fleet against us, if you so much as think about invading our worlds. He paused, then said, we will erase you. The command room felt smaller, colder. Zorvax saw the fear in his officers' eyes. They knew the human was serious. And worse, they believed him. Zorvax let out a slow breath. He had only one option left. He had to stall. He had to convince the high command that the humans weren't a threat, that the war was unnecessary. If he couldn't do that, then the Empire would doom itself. Very well, Captain Kane, Zorvax said at last. We will consider your warning. Kane's eyes narrowed. Don't consider it, Admiral. Obey it. And then, without another word, the UNS Phantom vanished. No warp signature, no trail, just gone. Zorvax exhaled sharply, his claws trembling as he looked at the destruction left behind. His fleet shattered, his authority broken. The Empire had always believed they were the dominant force in the galaxy. Tonight, they learned the truth. They weren't hunters. They were prey. And now, for the first time in history, the hunters were watching. The warship's power, beyond imagination. The control room of the Imperial flagship was eerily quiet. The destruction of the fleet, the terrifying technology of the human warship, and the chilling words of Captain Kane still echoed in the minds of every officer present. Admiral Zorvax stood motionless, staring at the empty void where the UNS Phantom had been just moments ago. No warp signature, no energy trail, nothing. It was as if the ship had never existed, except for the wreckage of the Imperial fleet drifting in the blackness of space, proof of its terrifying reality. The Empire had seen power before. They had encountered mighty civilizations, had crushed great warlords, had bent countless species to their rule. But this was different. This was beyond anything they had ever imagined. The aftermath, and the questions that followed. Zorvax took a deep breath, forcing himself to regain control. He turned to his officers, all of whom looked shaken, broken, unsure of what to do next. Status report, he ordered, keeping his voice firm. The first officer swallowed hard and checked the data feed. Sir, we lost 47 ships. Our dreadnought Obsidian Spear was destroyed in a single strike. Our energy weapons are depleted, and our shield reserves are failing. Most of our fleet is in disarray. Zorvax's claws dug into the armrest of his command throne. He expected the losses to be high, but hearing the exact numbers made it worse. 47 warships, gone, and the humans hadn't even taken damage. Zorvax exhaled, then turned to his lead science officer. I want an analysis of their weapons, their shields, their engines, everything. The scientist, an older, gray-skinned alien with thin, flickering tendrils, shook his head in disbelief. Sir, we have no explanation. Zorvax narrowed his eyes. What do you mean? The scientist hesitated, then spoke, his voice filled with both awe and terror. "Admiral, their weapons defy everything we know. Our sensors barely picked up their energy readings. They fired a single shot that destroyed our most advanced warship. They absorbed our attacks without any sign of shield strain. They moved faster than light, without using a warp drive." Zorvax's jaw tightened. "Are you saying they used a technology we can't understand?" The scientist's tendrils quivered. "I am saying, Admiral, that we are not fighting an enemy with advanced weapons. We are fighting an enemy whose technology is so far beyond ours that we might as well be using sticks and stones. The impossible shields." Zorvax clenched his fists. He refused to believe it. There had to be an explanation. "Are you telling me," he said slowly, his voice controlled but sharp, "that the humans have achieved technology thousands of years ahead of the Empire, that their warship is unstoppable?" The scientist hesitated before answering. "No warship is truly unstoppable," he said carefully, "but this one comes close." Zorvax exhaled. His mind raced. The shields, the weapons, the speed. Each time the humans did something impossible, it shattered the laws of known science. How? The answer came faster than expected. Another officer, pale and shaken, turned toward Zorvax. "Sir, we just intercepted a transmission from the USS Phantom." Zorvax stiffened. "What does it say?" The officer played the message. It was Kane's voice. But this time, he wasn't speaking to them. He was speaking to someone else. The mystery of Earth's return. Kane's voice was steady, confident, but there was something hidden beneath it. Something dangerous. Phase 1 complete. The Empire has been warned. Zorvax's eyes narrowed. Phase 1. Kane's voice continued. Returning to fleet. Orders from command are to hold position and await further instructions. No further engagement unless provoked. Zorvax's breath caught in his throat. Fleet. There was more than one warship. He turned to his officers, his claws tightening into his palm. "How many human warships have been detected in this sector?" The sensor officer hesitated. "Sir, we've only detected one." Zorvax exhaled. Maybe it was a bluff. Maybe Kane was making the Empire think there were more warships. But deep down, Zorvax knew the truth. If the humans had one ship like this, they had more. The Empire's next move. Zorvax stood, his mind now focused on one thing: survival. He had two choices: report to the Imperial High Command and warn them of the human threat. Ignore the warning, rebuild the fleet, and prepare for another battle. If he chose the first option, the High Command might not believe him. The Empire had never feared an enemy before. But if he chose the second, it could lead to the Empire's total destruction. His decision was made. "Prepare a transmission to the Imperial High Command," he ordered. The officers nodded, moving quickly. As Zorvax stared at the wreckage, he knew one thing for certain. The Empire had ruled the stars for 1,000 years, but this was the beginning of its fall. Because the humans were not here to play by the Empire's rules. They had their own. And the galaxy was about to learn just how dangerous humanity could be: surrender or annihilation. The corridors of the Imperial High Command were always alive with the quiet hum of discussion, the whisper of intelligence reports, and the unshakable belief in the Empire's absolute power. Until today. Until the warning arrived. Admiral Zorvax stood before the Imperial Grand Council, his scales damp with cold sweat. He had faced warlords, rebels, entire planetary uprisings, but nothing compared to this moment. Because today, he wasn't reporting a victory. He was reporting the death of the Empire's arrogance. The Grand Council chamber was vast, lined with towering stone columns carved with the history of the Empire's conquests. Seated in the center were the 12 High Lords of the Galactic Empire, their expressions ranging from curiosity to irritation. At the head of the council sat Supreme Overlord Varzel. His golden eyes burned into Zorvax's, unblinking, analyzing, waiting. Zorvax took a deep breath. There was no easy way to say this. "High Lords," he began, his voice steady despite the terror in his chest. "I come to you with a warning." Varzel's claws tapped against his obsidian throne. "A warning? From whom?" Zorvax exhaled. "From the humans." A murmur spread through the chamber. Some of the High Lords exchanged amused glances. Others barely reacted at all. Varzel leaned forward slightly, his gaze like a blade. "Humans." He let the word hang in the air, as if it were a joke. "Surely you are mistaken, Admiral." Zorvax straightened. "I wish I were." The room grew still. Zorvax pressed a button on his holopad, and a projection of the battle appeared. It showed everything. The UNS Phantom, the Empire's fleet firing first, the shields absorbing every attack, the instant annihilation of 47 warships, and finally, the words of Captain Kane. "This was your only warning." By the time the transmission ended, the room was no longer amused. It was silent. The High Lords, rulers of an empire spanning thousands of star systems, sat frozen. Even Varzel had stopped tapping his claws. Finally, one of the lords, a pale-skinned alien with deep-set crimson eyes, spoke. "What are we looking at?" Zorvax swallowed. "We are looking at the end of the Empire's military dominance." That caused a reaction, a sharp hiss of disbelief, a scoff from another lord. Varzel's eyes narrowed. "Explain yourself." Zorvax had expected this. The Empire had never feared any species before. Why would they now? So he spoke carefully, deliberately. "The human warship is unlike anything in the galaxy. Our strongest fleet, one of the most advanced armadas in history, could not scratch it. Their technology is beyond us. Their firepower is beyond us. If we challenge them again—" He hesitated, then said the truth aloud. "We will lose." Another murmur. A few of the High Lords scoffed, unwilling to believe it. Varzel, however, remained silent, watching, thinking. Then he asked the question Zorvax had been dreading. "And what do the humans want?" Zorvax took a deep breath. "They want us to stay out of their space. They want the Empire to withdraw all forces near their borders and cease any further aggression." A High Lord sneered. "Outrageous. They dare dictate terms to us." Another slammed his fist on the table. "We should wipe them out immediately. They can't possibly stand against the full force of the Empire." Zorvax's eyes flicked toward Varzel, but the Supreme Overlord was still thinking. This was it. This was the moment that would decide the fate of the Empire. Would they listen, or would their pride doom them? Zorvax made his choice. "High Lords," he said, "before you make a decision, let me remind you of something." He turned to the holoscreen, replaying the final words of Captain Kane. "If the Empire ever threatens human space again, we will erase you." Zorvax let the words sink in. Then he looked back at the High Lords. "This is not a negotiation. This is a warning. The humans do not want war, but if we push them, they will end this empire. Not in years, not in centuries, in days." Silence. Then Varzel finally spoke. His voice was low, calculating. "And do you believe them, Admiral?" Zorvax held his gaze. "I do." Varzel sat back, his fingers steepled in thought. The silence stretched long. Then, finally, he sighed. "Then we have only one choice." The High Lords turned to him, expectant. Varzel's golden eyes flickered. "We surrender." Gasps, protests, rage. "Impossible. We cannot bow to mere humans. We have ruled for 1,000 years. We are the Empire." Varzel raised a hand, and the room fell silent. His gaze swept across the room, lingering on each of them. "Have you all grown so soft? So arrogant?" His voice was calm, but the weight of command made it undeniable. "You saw the battle. You saw what they did. And if we refuse to listen, if we strike again, Do you know what will happen? He leaned forward. We will no longer be the Empire. We will be ashes. The room stilled. Zorvax let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Varzel had made his decision. The Empire would withdraw. The war that never truly began, was over. And the galaxy would never be the same again. The truth, the human warship wasn't alone. The decision was made. The Empire had ruled the stars for over 1,000 years. It had crushed civilizations, rewritten the laws of war, and dictated the balance of power across the galaxy. But today, the Empire surrendered. Not to an enemy fleet, not to a coalition of rebellious worlds, to one warship. And yet, as Admiral Zorvax stood in the silent halls of the Imperial High Command, he felt no relief. Because deep down, he knew this wasn't over. Something about this entire situation felt wrong. The humans were powerful, yes. Their warship had demonstrated a level of technology beyond comprehension. But why show mercy? Why warn instead of destroy? Zorvax's instincts screamed at him. The humans were hiding something. And he was about to find out what. The message that changed everything. 3 days had passed since the High Lords had agreed to surrender. Across the Empire, fleets were being recalled, border patrols withdrawn. The mighty war machine of the Galactic Empire was grinding to a halt. But something unexpected happened. A new transmission arrived. Not from the humans. From an Imperial listening post near the edge of the known galaxy. The signal was weak, heavily encrypted. It had been sent in secret. Zorvax read the first few lines of the message and felt his blood run cold. RGDNT REPORT. Immediate ATTNTION required. This is listening post E47 at the outermost edge of Imperial territory. We have detected something enormous moving in the void. It is not a single ship, it is an entire fleet. Hundreds, no, thousands of vessels. They are cloaked, hidden, and they bear the same energy signature as the UNS Phantom. Admiral, the humans were never alone. Zorvax's hand shook. For the first time in his long career, he felt something he had never felt before. Dread. The Phantom Fleet. Zorvax didn't hesitate. Within minutes, he had gathered his most trusted officers in a secure command chamber. The Imperial fleet had barely begun its withdrawal. And now this. Confirm the signal, he ordered. One of his officers tapped at their console, scanning the transmission. It's real, sir. No signs of forgery. The signal came directly from listening post E47. But something is strange. Zorvax narrowed his eyes. Explain. The officer hesitated. Sir, the listening post is gone. Silence. Zorvax felt a deep unease settle in his chest. Define gone. The officer swallowed hard. The station is no longer transmitting. All contact has been lost. 1 minute it was there. The next, nothing. Zorvax exhaled sharply. The humans had wiped out the listening post. Not as an act of war, not out of hostility, but to ensure the Empire never saw what lay beyond. A hidden empire. Zorvax turned to the holomap. His claws hovered over the display, tracing the last known location of the listening post. Why were the humans hiding a fleet that large? The UNS Phantom alone had been enough to break the Empire's will. What reason could they possibly have to keep thousands of warships hidden? Unless... Zorvax's breath hitched. Unless this wasn't just about the Empire. Unless there was something bigger at play. Something even the humans feared. A secret contact. For the first time in history, an Imperial admiral reached out to a human. The communication was risky. It could be considered an act of defiance. But Zorvax didn't care. He needed answers. The encrypted message was sent to the UNS Phantom, a direct request for communication with Captain Darius Kane. The reply came immediately. But instead of a written response, a live transmission appeared. And there, standing once again on his warship's bridge, was Captain Kane. But this time, something was different. Kane's expression wasn't mocking or arrogant. It was serious. Graham. As if he already knew why Zorvax was calling. "You shouldn't have sent that message, Admiral," Kane said. His voice was calm, but beneath it, something felt off. Zorvax met his gaze. "Then tell me the truth, Captain. Why was a fleet of human warships detected at the edge of Imperial space?" Kane's jaw tightened. Then, after a long pause, he said the words Zorvax never expected to hear. "Because the real war hasn't started yet." The warning that came too late. Zorvax's mind reeled. "Explain," he demanded. Kane's voice dropped to a deadly tone. "The reason we let you live, Admiral, the reason we warned you instead of erasing the Empire," he exhaled, "is because you're not our real enemy." A chilling silence filled the room. Zorvax's claws twitched. "Then who is?" Kane's face darkened. Something worse. The holoscreen flickered. A new image appeared. Not of the UNS Phantom. Not of human ships. But of something else. A monstrous fleet, black as night, with twisted organic hulls lined with glowing veins. An invasion force, and it was already coming. The real threat, and humanity's role. Zorvax stared at the image, his throat dry. "What is that?" Kane's answer was slow, cold, final. "A species so ancient, so advanced, that they don't conquer planets." Zorvax's eyes flickered with unease. "Then what do?" Kane met his gaze. "They erased them. The choice that would define the future." The pieces fell into place. The human fleet wasn't hiding because they feared the Empire. They were hiding because they were preparing. Not for war against the Empire, but for the true war that was coming. Zorvax swallowed hard. For centuries, the Empire had believed itself invincible. But now, they were faced with two simple choices: unite with the humans, or be wiped out along with the rest of the galaxy. And for the first time in history, the Empire was no longer in control. The final message, a warning to the galaxy. The Empire had believed itself eternal. For over 1,000 years, it had ruled with an iron grip, expanding its borders, crushing resistance, and shaping the fate of countless civilizations. It had fought wars against rebels, warlords, and rival empires, and won every time. But now, for the first time, it was powerless. And worse, it was afraid. The truth that could not be ignored. Admiral Zorvax stood frozen in his command chamber, staring at the monstrous fleet displayed on the holoscreen. It was a sight unlike anything he had ever witnessed. The ships weren't metallic constructs like those of the Empire or even the humans. They looked alive. Their black organic hulls pulsed like breathing flesh. Sickly green veins glowed across their surfaces, feeding energy into unknown, terrifying weapons. Their shape shifted constantly, like liquid metal reacting to unseen forces. They weren't warships. They were predators. And they were already moving toward the core worlds. Zorvax turned back to Captain Darius Kane, who stood on the bridge of the UNS Phantom, arms crossed, his face unreadable. "Tell me everything," Zorvax demanded. His voice was steady, but his hands were shaking. Kane exhaled slowly. "We call them the Vorlath. We don't know where they came from. We don't know what they want." Zorvax narrowed his eyes. "Then what do you know?" Kane's expression darkened. "We know what they do." He pressed a button on his console, and a new transmission appeared. Zorvax's breath caught in his throat. It was a planetary distress signal. A desperate voice filled the room, speaking in a language Zorvax barely recognized. A dying scream. And then the visuals came. A planet, burning. Not from war, not from orbital bombardment. From something else. The land was dissolving, crumbling into dust. Cities, forests, entire oceans, vanishing as if they had never existed. And then, as the recording reached its end, something horrifying appeared in the sky. One of the Vorlaf ships. It hung in orbit, its black surface shimmering with an unnatural glow. And the planet beneath it simply ceased to be. A dead silence filled the command chamber. Zorvax's throat was dry. He forced himself to breathe. "How?" he finally managed to say. Kane's gaze was grim. "We don't know. They don't conquer. They don't occupy. They consume." Zorvax's mind reeled. The Empire had fought many wars, but every war had an enemy that could be understood. The Vorlaf weren't an enemy. They were an extinction event. The humans' secret plan. Zorvax took a slow, measured breath, forcing himself to think. "How long have you known about them?" Kane hesitated. "Long enough." Zorvax's eyes narrowed. "So that's why your warship was here. You never intended to fight us. You were watching us." Kane didn't deny it. "We needed to know," he admitted. "The Vorlaf are coming. And when they arrive, the galaxy will burn. We needed to see if you were worth saving." Zorvax's jaw clenched. His pride screamed at him to lash out, to reject the implication. The Empire, reduced to a species that needed saving. But deep down, he knew it was true. "You underestimated us," Kane continued. "You saw humans as a weak species, just like the others. You thought we were prey." His expression turned cold. "But we are not prey." Zorvax believed him now. The UNS Phantom had proven it. The hidden human fleet had confirmed it. And yet there was one more question that needed answering. "If you knew about the Vorlaf," Zorvax asked, "why didn't you warn us earlier?" Kane's face darkened. "Because the last time we warned someone, they didn't listen. And they don't exist anymore." Zorvax felt a chill crawl down his spine. A choice that would decide the future. The reality was clear. The Empire could not fight the Vorlaf alone. Their fleets, their weapons, their armies, all useless against an enemy that didn't play by their rules. And so, for the first time in its history, the Empire had one final choice. Swallow their pride and fight alongside the humans. Refuse and face annihilation. Zorvax turned to Kane. His voice was low, but steady. "What happens now?" Kane studied him for a moment. Then he said, "Now we prepare. Together." Zorvax's chest tightened. The words tasted foreign on his tongue, but he forced them out. "The Empire will stand with you." Kane nodded, as if he had expected that answer. And then, for the first time, he smiled. "Good." The final warning. Across the galaxy, a transmission was sent. It was not a declaration of war. It was a warning. To every world, every species, every ruler who had once believed they were safe. The Vorlaf are coming. There will be no peace, no surrender, no negotiation. The only way to survive is to fight. The message echoed across the stars, and for the first time in history, humanity and the Empire stood as one. Side by side, not as conquerors, but as warriors, ready to face the true enemy. Together. Epilogue. The dark horizon. Beyond the edge of the known galaxy, the Vorlaf fleet stirred. They had felt the disturbance. They had sensed the resistance. And they were ready. In the darkness of space, a voice whispered, ancient, cold. "Let them prepare. Let them gather. It will make no difference." The stars flickered, and the galaxy's final war began.